each month is a month of many cause-related activities. As we've heard, between days, weeks, and the month of May, there's a lot of different cause-related initiatives that are being highlighted. And of course, May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. So this morning, we have, and I want to let people realize that we're represented by the 3 direct service divisions that comprise NCSS. Lance Mateer works in the Children, Youth, and Family Division. Rhea Nero works in the Behavioral Health Division, and Megan Garrett in our Developmental Disabilities Division. So those are the 3 direct service divisions that comprise NCSS. And this morning, they're going to make their presentation on addressing mental health and the importance of self-care during the pandemic. So without further ado, I will turn the screen over to the 3 of them.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah? All right. Awesome. So first, just thank you so much on behalf of NCSS. Thank you, folks, for allowing us to be here. And namaste, and we look forward to a great discussion. So I just want to start off with a disclaimer, right? Because that's always promising when you start something off with that. But this is actually our first time putting this presentation together. And so we would absolutely love your feedback, your input, right? Because everybody here is doing amazing and creative work to make sure the people in our community are taken care of. So we definitely want to make this like a collaborative, evolving presentation for everyone. So please throw comments. We're going to have a discussion at the end. It'll be amazing. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you, Lance. So external impacts on our mental health during the pandemic. So y'all have heard of this COVID-19 thing, right? This thing that has totally and completely changed our lives and the world, right? That in itself, let's face it, right? That's enough. That's more than enough. But the thing is that's not the only thing that we've endured during this past year. We've also endured racial injustices, right? And disparity. It's been magnified. We've seen protests, we've seen violence. Violence not only, I mean, it's enough for us to hear the death toll every day of this pandemic, right? But then on top of it, we're seeing violence of human beings against other human beings, right? Violence and protests on both sides, right? Not to mention the political landscape, right? Doesn't matter what side you're on, that's incredibly stressful as well. We look at grief and loss, and it's not just the grief and loss of human beings. That's profound in itself. It's also the grief and loss of the life we knew and of other things, right? A lot of folks here became teachers, right? When your kids were sent home right from school and trying to help them while navigating work and everything else, right? And just to see the magnification of the insecurities and just basic human needs, right? The amount of homelessness, of food insecurities, right? Just one of those things is enough, right? But collectively, what I like to call it is an assault on our nervous system, right? And so we know that stress is the #1 trigger, right, for exacerbations in physical and mental health issues, right? And so we see here on the slide, right, bodies, headaches, chest pains, tiredness. Who isn't so incredibly fatigued, right? If it's not just by the stress, it's by Zoom land, you're right. Upset stomach, just the physical health stuff. Mood, right? We are seeing an increase in anxiety and depression, mental health symptoms, feeling overwhelmed, irritable, right? Anger, sadness, lack of motivation, and behavioral changes, right? Changes in appetite, right? We've all heard of like the COVID-19, like the freshman 15, right? I'm gonna blame it on cortisol, right? Which is what stress does to us, okay? But you see angry outbursts, right? We see a huge increase in drug and alcohol misuse, tobacco misuse, right? Social withdrawal, we're exercising less, right? And so in during lockdown, and depending on what paper you read, liquor store sales went up 14 to 16% from the year prior. And it's my understanding that they continue to stay steady or go up at a higher rate, right? And Melinda talked about the increase in substance use. And we know this is happening. We know this is happening by the folks we're working with. And we know it by, and I think, Melinda, you said it was 38% increase in overdose deaths, right? That's huge. That is huge. That is something that we definitely need to come together and work on, right? But we can see the effects that all of these collective things are having on us, right? So if we go to the next slide, the thing I want you guys to know is that it is okay to feel stressed right now, and it is okay not to be okay all the time. So I'm going to just say that again because I think it's important, right? It's okay to feel stressed, and it's okay not to be okay all the time. So we, right, in the helping profession, a lot of us tend to not be so good with not being okay, right? Because we want to help. And as community providers, all of us have put like extra pressure and responsibility on ourselves, right? To stay strong for our community, our clients, our staff, but to also be strong for our children and our families and our friends, right? Because let's face it, our helper hat doesn't come off when we clock out of work. And even in the pandemic and everything, even when you clock out of work, that's been blurred, right? So I like to say, I like to be strength-based, right? I'm a clinician. So I like to say we helpers have gotten really good at fine-tuning our defense mechanisms, right? But suffering in silence. So the human brain, it doesn't like change, right? It doesn't like the unknown. In fact, we get, I call it a little dopamine treat, right? We get an increase in dopamine when we complete a pattern, right? But let's face it, this whole past year, almost everything has seemed uncertain. It has questioned so much of what we thought we knew and how we did things. So if we, look at the slides, the self-report of anxious and depressive symptoms, substance use, and/or suicidal thoughts and self-harm behaviors have increased 30 to 120% among adults, with the highest number among adults, among young adults, isolated older adults, and non-Caucasian adults. That is significant, right? And we're seeing that in the community when we're trying to get people in for assistance, right? And there's this huge wait list, right? And it doesn't matter if it's mental health, medical, substance abuse, it's all one, right? The mind-body connection, it is all one. We see an increase in PTSD symptoms, right? For like direct line workers. And so the thing that we really want you to know is that we need to give ourselves permission to be stressed, to not be okay at times. And we need to allow ourselves to acknowledge this, and to acknowledge the feelings within us. And I say this, right? I'm a therapist, so I say this like I do it all the time, right? No, we're all awful at it, right? But it's really true that we need to give ourselves permission to feel, all right? And really acknowledge what's going on inside. if we go to the next slide, it's also all right. We're getting there. It's also all right if you're doing just fine, right? Because some people are. Some people are seeing the community, right? We talked about what we're grateful this morning, seeing the community come together. And I'm incredibly excited to hear some of the creative, magnificent ways that you've have come up with to meet community needs, right? Some people are thriving. They're connected with their family, their friends, right? Their pets, nature, hobbies, spiritual ways, right? A decrease in anxious symptoms by not having to physically engage in social activities, right? And we see an increase in local and community involvement and supports. But also to acknowledge with that if you tend to be one of those people that see the positive, right? Because wherever there's a negative, there's a positive, and vice versa. But those folks tend to struggle too, right? Or feel guilt, like, oh, like, look, I'm thriving. Or, I might have to endure the projections of people that are frustrated. And how dare you be positive when X, Y, and Z, right? So it's really important for us just to take a moment and take a minute every day and throughout the day to really check in and honestly ask and honestly listen to ourselves. But what state am I in today? Right? And that might fluctuate. You might be surviving, you might be just getting by, you might be living, you might be thriving, and that could change within the hour. But the thing that we want you to know is that whatever it is, that's okay. It's okay to feel the way you do. And so I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, a phenomenal speaker, Lance, and he is going to tell us how we can, ways that we can help ourselves.
Great, thanks, Ray. Yeah, so definitely we probably have been talked to and at and about self-care ad nauseum, especially for the last year. But we'll talk to you about self-care a little bit more, but I would really challenge us to think about, when we're thinking about self-care, it's really not an addition to, right? So rethink self-care as in it's not making sure that you do these activities or taking extra time out of your day to do something that you feel good about. Because the number one thing that I hear when we talk about self-care is I don't have time to do this, right? I'm too busy, I can't fit it into my day. So trying to think about self-care as a state of mind or a state of being, working to shift your perspective, thinking positively, so recognizing strengths and things that are going on, and then maybe also incorporating activities or even just recognizing activities that you already do throughout the day as well. So we don't want this concept of self-care to be an addition to what you're doing already or feel unmanageable. So we've kind of broken down self-care into 6 different dimensions of wellness. So social, physical, intellectual, spiritual, vocational, and emotional. And we know that these definitely all kind of blend together as well. So we'll jump into some of the dimensions, but first, I have a couple of assessments that I've taken. We actually do one of these assessments at NCSS as well. I've done it with my team. I think that it can be really helpful for you all to use. So it's a helpful resource. And what I'll do right now is actually put links to these into the chat. We won't have time to do it in our time together today, but it could be something that you do after. So the first is a self-care assessment, and there's a lot of different versions of these, but I like this assessment because it's really just a self-evaluation of how do I think that I'm doing in these different domains. And so you really just rate yourself in all of the domains that we just talked about. The next, I think, is really important, especially for people in the helping professions. So this is a compassion fatigue assessment called the ProQual, and it's a professional quality of life assessment. And I think what's really helpful about this is Rhea had mentioned it when she talked about PTSD or post-traumatic stress symptoms. I think that's a very real risk for us, and a risk of post-traumatic stress, but also vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue. And I'm kind of using those synonymously. But that's really just, I mean, we call it burnout, right, in our field, where you just don't have the energy or the empathy, you know, to continue working in this field. So I think this is a really great assessment. If you wanted to follow that, it takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and then you can actually score yourself, and it'll give you a different breakdown of kind of where you're at in different domains. All right, so jumping into some of the aspects of wellness, social wellness, I think, is incredibly important, and it's something that's been definitely impacted by the last year as well. So what we know, resiliency research tells us for youth and for adults, that actually having a close relationship with other people or that social interaction is actually very protective for our mental health. And it's actually one of the #1 protective factors in young people, having a close connection with someone else. And that has definitely been impacted. We've seen that in the youth that we work with in the children division, because of the way that school has been restructured, and obviously because of some of the social distancing limits that we've had. I think what's been really awesome for our team in children's, at least, and I know in the other divisions, we've been using telehealth. That's been a really great way to connect with people. It's actually increased some of our connections with some of the clients that we work with as well. And personally, I'm connecting with a lot more family members via Zoom as well. So, you know, we talked about Zoom fatigue, but the increase in technology use, I think, can actually help us with our social wellness as well. And then I think also another really thing to think about when it comes to social wellness is how you recharge, right? So we've heard of introverted versus extroverted, but thinking about the activities that help to continue for you to feel good and to have that social engagement. I think that physical health or physical wellness also goes along with social wellness as well. Some of the activities that I used to do pre-COVID, things like hiking or you know, even just having you know, going to the gym sometimes with people, you know, can be a pretty social activity. You know, these often go hand in hand. So thinking about, you know, some of these aspects with our physical health as well. So things like taking a break when you're sick, I think is incredibly important. Making sure that you have adequate sleep, proper nutrition, accessing preventative care, which I know that has been difficult for some of us over the last year as well. And then again, getting some regular physical activity, I think, is incredibly important. Ray had talked about some of the dopamine and you know, the other endorphins and hormones that are released when we're engaging in physical activity. That can be incredibly important. So thinking about our emotional wellness, and I would say our cognitive, really like our perspective as well on life, I think this can be an area that can be incredibly beneficial if we change some of our perspectives about what's going on in our lives. So part of that could be having an increased awareness of our stressors, right? Really actually maybe sitting down and making a list or breaking it down with a partner or a friend or someone that you can talk to really concretely identify what some of the stressors are, and then making a really active plan to tackle some of those. I think this concept of self-care shouldn't or doesn't need to actually be done in isolation. It can be really great when you know that other people are trying to make positive changes in their life as well, and you can support them and they can support you, and vice versa. So it can be really helpful to engage other people in your life in these conversations about self-care and let them know the changes that you're trying to make in your life. So thinking about stress management, thinking about what you can let go of, what you don't need to worry about, or things that are out of your control. I you know, in the beginning of all of this, just the amount of time ruminating, you know, on different aspects of all of the different areas, things that are going wrong in the world or stressful in the world that Rhea popped up earlier on her presentation, that can be incredibly overwhelming. So giving ourselves permission to kind of prioritize and then also to eliminate some of those stressors can be really beneficial. And then making sure that we have an emotional awareness skills to access, self-regulation. I also think about when we're incredibly stressed, I would say, and kind of making a generalization, but with professional helpers as well, we're some of the least compassionate people to ourselves when we're really stressed out. So I try to think about if we had a client or a friend come to us talking about their level of stress, what advice we would give to them, or what kind of empathic listening we would do for them. We can give ourselves permission to do the same thing for ourselves. So really having some self-compassion, I think, is really important as well. So kind of along with emotional wellness is spiritual wellness as well. So spiritual wellness can really be defined in a lot of different ways. For some people, that's prayer, reflection, meditation. For me personally, it's a connection to my environment and to nature. This concept of spiritual wellness is having this larger kind of guiding force or sense of purpose that's really guiding you and kind of keeping you on track. And for some of us, our sense of purpose has shifted a little bit during the last year as well. So having something that is keeping you connected is super important. So thinking about vocational wellness, this is something that I've focused on, or we've focused on, I think, a lot at NCSS, more than I would have expected a year ago. But really thinking about how we're taking care of each other as a team within school-based clinical services, I think, is incredibly important. We do regular check-ins and just leave a lot of downtime for processing. There's this, I think, a really strong sense of empowerment when you're feeling like you're in it together with other people. And I think there's been a lot to, probably for all of us to think about with our vocational wellness, with, working from home, we're needing to set different boundaries. This concept of what is the beginning of your workday and the end of your workday can also be really difficult if you're working from home. So making sure that we're taking time to set really clear boundaries, I think, is really important. And then this point about reflective supervision, I think, is important as well. So having time to process either with your coworkers or with other people in your life about the emotional weight that this work, especially in the last year, has had on us, I think, is incredibly important. We know if we're not talking about or processing through somehow the emotional weight of our situations, a lot of negative impacts, and there could be a lot of negative impacts on our mental health. And then this last point, which we're probably all not very great at because we're trying to help other people, is saying no, right? So making sure that we're able to say no if we're at our limits, or at least knowing that we don't need to be the person to do everything. So we have potentially other team members that can support us, just regularly checking in around what we're needing from our team members during this time can be super helpful. So this concept of leisure, our leisure time or hobby wellness, I think, is really important as well. And I have to say, if there's one aspect that's, I think, helped my mental health through this last year, it's probably having a hobby. So I'm a woodworker, or I try to be a woodworker. And it can be really helpful to think about woodworking or projects that I'm designing or furniture design, instead of ruminating on work or other things, other stressors that aren't going well. So giving yourself permission and actually mindfully trying to think about, things that are engaging to you can be really helpful, so that you're not sitting and ruminating on things that don't make you feel good. Thinking about this last year has been we've had a lot of opportunity to develop new hobbies as well, because a lot of us have found extra free time. So again, this is kind of like the spiritual, having something that gives you a sense of purpose or a sense of identity that's positive and rewarding and refreshing to you, I think, is really important, that we're creating this for ourselves. And with all of this, it's really giving yourself permission and making it a priority in your life to actually focus on these different aspects of wellness. And I think it would be really awesome to actually just put into the chat, out of these things, like I said, woodworking or having a really positive hobby has been something that's helped me. I'm not sure if people have different things that have helped them through this last year or things that they focused on. Definitely welcome to unmute yourself or put that into the chat if you'd like to contribute, because I think it can be helpful to just have examples of ideas as well. So many walks. All right. And while people are putting things into the chat, we can reflect on that. But I wanted to leave a couple of mobile apps as well. So we've shared these definitely with people that we work with, and we've downloaded them ourselves. But these can be things to really just kind of keep self-care at the forefront of your mind and to keep us focused on self-care. All right, so there's definitely some really great things into the chat, and a lot of these things that I'm seeing, wouldn't take a lot of extra time as well.
Thank you, Lance. So as Ray and Lance had already talked about, COVID-19 has had a significant effect on all of us over the past 13 months plus. We're going into our 14th month, I guess, at this point. But for the people that we serve at NCSS in these 3 direct staff or direct divisions, the impact has been just monumental. So I work in developmental services. Again, I'm a therapist there. And we have found that our clients have just faced the loss of a home placement. A lot of our clients live with home providers, which are community members that open their home. And because of the reduction in services that we provide outside of the home, we've found that some people have been at risk of losing their home. So that's been a huge impact. There's been a decrease in social opportunities for our clients. They're not able to get out as much as they had wanted to before. And so with that, we're seeing an increase in challenging behaviors, which is a struggle, for our clients especially, and for the people that they live with. We've obviously seen an increase in mental stress, anxiety due to the quarantine restrictions. A lot of our clients are at a higher risk of actually getting COVID-19 due to their underlying medical conditions, or maybe not fully understanding the CDC guidelines of kind of like how to be safe out in the community. And we've really seen an increase in an exploitation of our clients by other people. So something to keep our mind on how that population, has been impacted. For the Children, Youth, and Family Division, they've seen some increase in the family stressors. More time unsupervised. The students have, been home and parents have to work, as we had talked about before. And a really large increase in the use of technology. Students are missing some milestones at school because they're not getting the maybe the one-on-one attention or education that's needed. And there's an increase in truancy and acuity. And for our behavioral health division, we're seeing an increase in symptoms that people are feeling. As Rhea had said earlier, an increase in the substance abuse or use. And as Melinda was saying earlier, the opioid overdose rate has increased significantly. We've seen a lot of isolation. People are feeling very lonely during this time. There's been an increase in involuntary hospitalizations, less access to hospital beds because a lot of the hospital beds were taken up with people who have been very sick with COVID, and just managing the residential programs while trying to maintain safety for everybody that's involved. Next slide, please. Thanks. So when COVID-19 hit in March of 2020, our leadership team and staff at NCSS really moved into action. And we were flooded with ever-changing information, but throughout it all, we just wanted to ensure the health and safety of all of the people that we serve. And so we wanted to make sure that the most vulnerable clients that we serve were safe and continue to be our number one priority. So this is how we met the needs of the community that, as things were changing. So we continue to provide essential services for high-risk clients face-to-face. We ensure that clients had the food that they needed. Everything's been over Zoom lately, so we provided Zoom assistance to ensure access to providers. We provided clinical and psychiatric services over Zoom, by phone and in person. We opened up Zoom therapeutic groups to reduce feelings of isolation and loneliness, and we provided a holiday meal door to door. We help people with the social distancing guidelines, and we provide remote services. We supported students remotely, and we looked for alternative spaces for people to use so they could learn. In the developmental service division, we offered a COVID vaccine clinic, and we were able to administer over 100 doses of the vaccine to some of our most vulnerable clients, which was wonderful. Our nursing staff has been excellent there. And we offered an iPad loaner program because there were quite a few people that weren't able to access Zoom because they didn't have the technology at home, but we were able to let people take out iPads. And then we also opened up some activity centers at the Elks Lodge and the Dairy Center, which has been great for our clients. So what we wanted to talk about further today, as Lance was asking earlier, is what kind of community needs are you all seeing? And what ideas do you guys have for coping strategies? So I wanted to open it up to everybody for you to either unmute and share, or to share in the chat.
I'll go. Deb Coyam here. That what you just shared really resonated with me, and I'm sure with Harry, because our population that Age Well serves is facing all of those things. So really, the elder community has really struggled with mental health, being socially isolated, not being able to see families. Those in nursing homes couldn't see loved ones. It's been very, very difficult. So we've offered some of those same things, of course, our Meals on Wheels and our iPad program. But the need for the mental health services. So appreciating that connection with NCSS, because there's such a need for that. And just trying to, now that we're opening back up, it's great. We can start doing some home visiting and things like that. And clients are really appreciative of that. But all of those things have faced our elderly population, and it's been a really tough 14 months. Hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. And coping strategies for me, I like to read. I like to do mind games. AARP has some great stuff out there. So I'm always trying to challenge myself. I have been starting to exercise more and more. So I try to take the time during the day to do that, to stretch, to play with my dog. My dog is my best therapy, besides my husband. But I mean, who doesn't love to, well, maybe some people don't love dogs, but my best therapy. So really, like, for coping strategies, and I'm one of those people that it's always, I'm the cup half full and my husband's the cup half empty. So,
Yeah.
but it's also been good for me lately, who's always had to be the strong one in my whole family and network, to actually admit, like most recently, even to my husband, like, I'm not feeling strong, I'm feeling sad. And being able to actually voice that for myself, where I never used to say, like, I'm just not doing well. And, that's important, to be able to acknowledge that for yourself and tell that to someone, you love or someone else. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Debbie, that's huge. And I just want to say I'm proud of you because that takes
Yeah.
a lot of courage. It does, right? As helpers, it takes a lot of courage to finally just be like, whoo, yeah, like I'm not okay sometimes. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Deb. That's awesome.
I think I'll jump in too. Thank you, Debbie. That was an awesome share, and it helps to kind of break the floor. Some of the needs that we've been identifying, and this is again kind of with my substance misuse hat on, is the need for more workers in the field with behavioral health and substance use disorder that despite the fact that we have some amazing talent in our community and statewide, there are so many open positions and we're still so much in need because the need has increased at a rate that we haven't been able to keep up with. And as far as I think it was Lance had mentioned the ProQual tool. I love that tool. And that's something that I feel it's a great timing to start re-implementing it in organizations so we can, as providers, do a self-assessment of where we're at and how stable and grounded we are to provide stable grounding services to the people that we help. Another thing that's been helpful for me more personally, there's an app that I just downloaded in my phone the day before yesterday that Dr. White, our director, brought to our attention called Breathwork. And it's a very easy app to download. And it's a wonderful reminder for people like me that seem to be able to do some pretty challenging things and I can accomplish a lot. And on the same token, I forget to do very simple things like breathe and really be mindful in that. So that app is super helpful. And I also start my morning with Lumosity, which is a great way to kind of keep the brain strong and focused in a number of different areas. And we've been looking at, now I'm going to put my police advisory board hat on, but we did a training for the implicit bias training, and the Lumosity goes really hand in hand with what we receive for training on implicit bias and how do we even become aware of the biases that we may have. And that's with anything, whether it's, race, gender, it might be people's occupation, whatever that might be. So I find that the Lumosity is a great tool as well for an everyday tool that doesn't take very long. And then music also is a huge healing for me, exercise. And I'm going to piggyback off what Deb said too. I don't have dogs, but I have 2 cats and they are my loves. And they have really made it easier I feel like I can be under stress. And if I just look at one or touch them, and sometimes they're not interested in looking back at me, and that's okay too, but just being able to connect with them. And then of course, having a husband who's also in recovery. So we have, thank you, Lord, very good communication where we can say, I'm feeling off. And sometimes we don't know why. And I love in your training, how you were saying too, it's almost like you don't have to know. It's okay to not feel okay and just accept this is where I am. I'm not going to try to escape it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to accept that this is where I'm at. And then also then I can start taking steps on trying to use some of those coping skills. But if I'm not wanting to be honest with myself and just say, no, I'm okay, that doesn't work. And for me, my anxiety manifests in my body, and it can make it very challenging when I have to be on and appearing to be stable. And maybe I've got the coping skills in my mind, so I'm at peace, but my body is freaking out. And that I've had to play at funerals. I'm singing at a burial again next week for people we keep losing with addiction, and that can be challenging. So to be able to say, this is bothering me, it hurts, and also I'm ready to take a step to come to acceptance so I can move forward. So I love your presentation. I feel like the timing couldn't have been any better for me personally. So thank you all for a beautiful presentation.